Well, the 2025 NBA draft class was headlined as one of the best draft classes in NBA history, with guys like Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, or Dylan Harper. All the way at the 18th overall pick might just be one of the biggest steals of this draft class in Walter Clayton Jr., the 4-year national champion who is now going to be a guard for the Utah Jazz. Clayton Jr. had the near-perfect 4-year college career. After switching over late in his high school life from football to basketball, he played at Iona for 2 years. Over at Iona, he was the Conference Player of the Year, as well as he led the entire country in free throw percentage, shooting 95% from the line. Following his breakout season, he transferred to the University at Florida. From there, he took over the team's starting guard role, and he absolutely broke out, averaging 17.5 points per game as he led the team to the tournament for the first time in 2 seasons. In the first round of March Madness, he put up a 33-point performance, but it just wasn't enough as the Florida Gators were eliminated by the Colorado Buffaloes. After initially declaring for the draft, Walter Clayton Jr. would decide to come back for his senior year at the University of Florida, and that is where everything changed for him. Through his leadership, play, and development, Walter Clayton Jr. became one of the best players in all of college basketball, and the Florida Gators became the best team in the country. The Gators, who the year prior won 24 games, would go on to win 36 games, including setting a school record for the most wins against the SEC in a single season. They also became known as a giant slayer, defeating the #1 ranked Tennessee Volunteers as well as the #1 ranked Auburn Tigers twice in that single season. Clayton Jr. had the year of a lifetime. In his senior season, he would put up 18 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists on 45, 38, 87 shooting splits. This wasn't just the best year of his college career, it was one of the best seasons in college in general. And he also became known as one of the best shooters in the entire country. That 38% from 3 mark, that was on 8 attempts per game, which is absolutely insane. Clayton Jr. would be named SEC Tournament MVP. He was a first-team consensus All-American, and he even won SEC Male Athlete of the Year, beating out football players. But there was more to be done, as Florida was ranked #1 in the West, and they went to work. They dominated all the way through March Madness and made it up to the Elite 8. In the Elite 8, Clayton dropped 30 points on Texas Tech, and in the Final Four, he dropped 34 points on Auburn to send them to the national championship. In the title game, Walter Clayton Jr. wouldn't have the greatest game shooting-wise, however, he would show the versatility of his game, putting up 7 assists, as well as the defensive play that won the Gators the national championship. So on top of all the awards and accolades that he has already won, you can now add a national champion, as well as the Final Four's most outstanding player to his list. And in March Madness, Clayton Jr. was one of the most dominant players in the country. He averaged around 22 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists per game, being just shy of a 50-40-90 stretch. In the biggest games of his career, he was averaging a near 20-point 50-40-90. That is not very common, especially in college. Despite all the national attention he got, and despite being one of the best guards in the country, he slid all the way down to the 18th overall spot, where he was drafted and subsequently traded to the Utah Jazz. But this would actually pair him with one of the quietest young cores in the entire NBA. While Lauri Markkanen is the headline star for the Utah Jazz, Utah quietly has some really solid young players. Of course, there's Walter Clayton Jr. and his fellow rookie Ace Bailey, but now you add in players like Walker Kessler and Kyle Filipowski, and Utah kind of has a decent little core going on. Now, Ace Bailey, the #5 overall pick and one of the best bucket getters in all of college basketball, is expected to be the headlining force on this Utah Jazz team. But don't let Walter Clayton Jr. slip away just yet. There is a reason why the Florida Gators were known as a giant slayer, and there is a reason why he was the best player on the best team in the country. Historically, the 18th overall pick doesn't produce a lot of stars. Usually the 18th overall pick gives us like rotational players or even just fringe NBA players. However, I think Walter Clayton Jr. can be someone who kind of breaks this mold for this draft spot. If anything, I think he can actually become a key player in the future for this Utah Jazz team. From a pure shooting standpoint, few players in this draft class are on his level. But with Clayton, his shooting isn't just backed up with statistics, it passes the eye test. Walter Clayton Jr. has a quick, smooth release, he's got solid shooting fundamentals, and this allows him to take shots from anywhere on the floor. We saw this in college. He could spot up, he could hit from the corner, he could come off a screen, a handoff, a pick and roll, whatever shot was necessary was one that he was willing to take. Beyond that, he also showed extreme range, shooting 25, 26, 27-foot bombs. And it's usually not uncommon to see a little bit of a shooting slump or a little bit of a shooting decrease as a player transitions from college into the NBA, but given the fact that Clayton Jr. was a good free throw shooter, given the fact that he has good fundamentals, and given the fact that he is used to shooting very far shots, I think he's going to come into the league as an outstanding shooter. And as we saw last year, Walter Clayton Jr. is used to playing in big-time games, he's used to the spotlight, so I don't think the NBA is going to be too big for him from a mental standpoint. And his mid-range game also matches this. While he's not at the level of being a 3-level scorer, he does have a very solid mid-range game, especially pulling up or out of the pick and roll, and he does have a floater game to complement it. He's not the best finisher at the rim, finishing around 60% for his senior season. This is something that I think he could be a little better at, but it's never really been the hallmark of his game. But he is also a decent playmaker in this area as well. But the thing is Utah needs the skill set. They were a bottom 8 offense and 3-point shooting team last season. What does Walter Clayton Jr. do? He comes in, he scores the ball, he shoots the rock, and he gives you offense. He gives you that offensive spark, and that is exactly what Utah needs. Now, Clayton Jr. is described as a combo guard, and what he does lack in frame, he makes up for an effort on the defensive side of the ball. He averages a steal per game in college, which I find is somewhat impressive with his small wingspan. I don't think he's ever going to have the physical tools to be an elite defender, but he was still an above average one during his time at Florida. Now, one thing I do keep in mind with young defenders is what kind of team are they going into? Are they going into a team that already has a good defense that they can adapt to? Are they going into a good team that has a good culture? Or are they going into a team that already has a good rim protector that can at least bail out guys on the perimeter? Now, Utah may have their rim protector in Walker Kessler. Last season, Kessler averaged about 2.5 blocks per game, which was good for second in the entire NBA. Unfortunately, though, Utah had the last ranked defense in the NBA, which is statistically one of, if not the worst defenses of all time. So Utah doesn't really have that defensive home that I think will improve Walter Clayton Jr.'s skills, but the other way that you could look at it is the fact that they can really only get better from here, and I do think Clayton Jr. can still end up being a positive defensive player as his career goes forward. Now, I've seen mixed things as a playmaker as far as Walter Clayton Jr. goes. However, the general consensus is that he's a good passer who has recently shown major improvements in his abilities out of the pick and roll and especially in transition. While his numbers have remained low, averaging just about 3 assists per game for his entire collegiate career, Clayton Jr. has shown steady growth as a passer, especially in the pick and roll. But beyond that, like I said, he's shown great improvement in transition. He's got the vision, he keeps his head up, he fills out lanes well, he pushes the pace, and he is always looking to create plays whenever he is on defense. This was something that helped out the Florida Gators, and I'm sure it can help out this Utah squad that was near the bottom of the league, both in pace and fast break points per possession. From a pure skill standpoint, Walter Clayton Jr. I think is way better than someone who was drafted 18th overall. However, holding him back is his physicals or lack thereof and the fact that he is an older prospect. Now, Utah was in the bottom 10 of the league in assists last season, and looking at this new roster for the upcoming year, they don't exactly have a primary ball handler or a primary guy to make plays. I definitely don't trust a guy like Keontae George, and they did lose Colin Sexton this offseason. The Jazz don't really have that high-level guard for a guy like Walter Clayton Jr. to play off of, and Clayton Jr. himself doesn't exactly have that primary point guard skill set. Yes, he's been getting better at it, but he isn't really there just yet. And that makes sense. Clayton Jr. stands around 6'2", weighing 195 pounds with a 6'4" wingspan. So definitely more of a point guard frame, and he doesn't exactly have the tools to make him an amazing defender, at least right away. However, the promising part with his athleticism does come with the fact that he has a 37-inch max vertical, which definitely explained why he was such a good fast break player and helped him put up such amazing highlights in college. So while his frame is a little bit small, I still think he has the body, and I still think he has the athleticism to keep up with the NBA, especially if he can grow a bit more as a playmaker. But the other glaring part to his game is that he turned 22 years old in March, meaning he is going to be 23 by the end of his rookie year. If you look at his fellow teammate in Ace Bailey or Cooper Flagg, who was incredibly young when he was drafted, both of these guys are going to be closer to their second contracts by the time they are Walter Clayton Jr.'s age. Typically speaking, it's not a hard rule, but typically speaking, players who come into the league later have a bit of a lower ceiling, but they have a higher floor, so they may be able to produce a little bit more immediately, but they're less likely to become those all-star players. And while I believe in somebody's ability to break out and become a better player no matter what point they are in their career, front offices typically don't give out contracts. They typically don't bet on a guy who is 22 going to be 23 years old. Doesn't mean he can't be a good NBA player, just means that he probably won't be that all-star, all-NBA level player that you expect a guy in your first round pick that you want him to be. But his development is what is going to keep Walter Clayton Jr. in the NBA, and I think it's what's going to make him a good NBA player. Like I said, he's got the skill set of the two, but the body of the one. However, he's developing a more point guard-like skill set, and the modern NBA definitely doesn't value positions nearly as much as it did in the past. So even if you have a shooting guard like skill set and a point guard like body, that doesn't mean that there isn't not a role for you, and we've seen this with other players in the league. So while his size and his age are somewhat of a concern, I don't really look at it as a red flag for a guy like Walter Clayton Jr. I think it's just more of a footnote. But going off of what I just said, there are other players in the league like Walter Clayton Jr. So what exactly can he become? What can we expect out of a guy at his spot? So a very similar player to him is actually Peyton Pritchard of the Boston Celtics. Pritchard was drafted a bit older, starting his career at 23 years old, and he stands just 6'1". Pritchard was a solid contributor for years before winning the Sixth Man of the Year award last season. But I think there's actually a reasonable chance that Walter Clayton Jr. can become a similar player to a former Utah Jazz player, and that actually makes me think he's going to be a little bit more like Jordan Clarkson. Clarkson, like Pritchard and like Clayton Jr., came into the league a little bit of an older rookie, but he was one of the better scorers for his entire career, never averaging below double-digit points per game for his entire career. Clarkson is also 6'3". He's not much of a defender, he's not a crazy playmaker, but he is one of the best sixth men of all time. That, I think, is the perfect role for Walter Clayton Jr. A spark off the bench who can add spacing and add that boost to a team's offense without being a complete throw when it comes to their defense or when it comes to a playmaking perspective. And of course, neither Clarkson or Pritchard were really seen as crazy primary ball handlers. I mean, they definitely developed more into their career, but a guy like Clarkson, he was never a point guard for his career. So I think it's more than reasonable to think that Utah may have just found their next Jordan Clarkson. They may have just found one of the league's best next elite sixth man, and a guy who is capable of possibly just a little bit more than that. At the 18th overall pick, the Utah Jazz drafted the best player on the best team in college basketball. We're talking a guy who is consistently improving as a playmaker, as a finisher, and is already one of the best shooters in the entire country. In one of the most stacked draft classes of all time, the Utah Jazz may have just found the steal of the draft that will help lead them to a new era. Guys, that is it for this video. What do you think Walter Clayton Jr. is going to be capable of in the NBA? And what do you think the Utah Jazz are going to be looking like in the next few years? I definitely want to hear your comments down below. But that is it for this one. If you liked the video, you know what to do, and I will catch you all next time.